because step one on making the linkage part for the arm is to cut off all of the fingers off the little servo hub except for one. So the fact that these are a little bit different layout isn't really going to make any difference because we're going to cut them off anyway. So once I do that, they're going to look pretty much the same because you end up with just the one little hub sticking up. And as long as that's the same length as this, and it is, that'll work. So, do it again. One of you guys will, well, I'll snip these, I guess. Maybe I'll make these. Who the hell knows, right? And we're going to take a 632 nut and bolt. And a nut and bolt. And they're going to have to pass through this part. Well, the hole that's in there is a little too small for the 632 to fit. So either you take a drill bit or take an X-Acto knife, and this stuff cuts real easy. It's just ream it out, basically. It doesn't have to be dead center or anything like that, because we don't even really care that the screw touches the center. We're going to be making our slip clutch another way. See, I don't even care that that's sloppy. It'll be fine, actually. So anyway, we take the screw, and on the flat side, put it in. Then we'll have our nut starting on the side that's got the nipple. And we won't screw it together. What we're going to do now is put a drop of super glue right on the threads. Then we're going to thread this thing down all the way, and just holding onto it with our hands, tighten that nut down. And not super tight, just till it's tight. Once that super glue sets up, you know, it just depends on your super glue and the temperature. 5-10 minutes from now, if you were to grab hold of the screw, because now the nut should be glued to the screw, you'll find that you can still forcibly turn this piece, and yet it takes some strength to do it. So in other words, what we've now built is a slip clutch, because the arms are going to be connected on the end of this screw outside the body. This little lever is inside the body, being moved by a mechanism. But if somebody grabbed that arm, we now know that it could slip without breaking anything, right? And yet it's tight enough that it can move the arm. So now you get the gist of what we're trying to build here. Anyway, here we got some I got some really old super glue that's starting to turn thick on me, which is perfect for this. Put a glop of it on there. Just thread it up. We don't even really care if some slops over into this plastic, because it won't stick to it anyway. Nothing sticks to it. It's nylon. Finger tightened it. There's one. Of course, you got to do two of them to go on a robot. Take this. I'd already reamed this one out. Like that. This poor old super glue is over a year old. It almost doesn't even move in the bottle anymore. Pretty cool. I know you can buy super thick, but I don't think it gets this super thick. I've used thinner here, so it doesn't matter that it's thick. That's not what's making this work. So don't worry about that. Again, I just tighten it down. If you overly tighten it, it'll just make the clutch really hard to work. It's just a protection thing. So once those set up, we then have our two slip clutches that our arm linkage can connect to, and our arm connects on the outside of that, and we're all set. Stuck a few screws in the back to hold all these parts together. What I would then do next, I think, would be to take the goop glue, and I would put some goop on this side where the vertical antenna is going to poke through, and I'd put goop on the bottom. Obviously don't put any on the side that's going to be near where the spinning antenna is. So pretending like there's glue all over this piece now, would work it up in there. Have the vertical antenna sitting here. Let's try this again where this is sitting where I can work on it. We got glue on it, we got that there. We bring the vertical antenna in, work it into place. Then we can run a screw right here next to the vertical antenna, and that should go into the resin part. Good. And everything can turn, and in the end this antenna would get pushed in further, so there's more shaft in there, like that. and then just reach in with a screwdriver and put a little bit of space back, you know, so there isn't so much slop. But it should still turn real free is the point. And it does. What we would be doing next is taking these slip linkage parts that we made, and I normally put a little bit of grease around this nut because it's going to rub on the metal on the inside, and you could use Vaseline or anything you wanted. I've got some black graphite grease that's kind of cool shit, and then of course then there's always your general purpose grease, but put a little bit on there for lube, and you stick it right through the hole in the side of the bot. Then what I'm going to provide with it is this cardstock, and that's just a 1-inch circle with a hole, and you'll just cut them out with scissors and either drill the hole or poke the hole out with an X-Acto knife or whatever you want. But that's going to form a simple washer that once you've cut that out, you'll poke over this screw, and that'll reduce the amount of friction between this resin part that you've painted and the body you painted, because paint to paint tends to give you a lot of friction. So if you stick a little something in between, like a little paper washer, it won't take up much space, and yet it'll reduce the friction by a lot. Well, here we have, I cut one out, poked a hole through it. We've got our linkage part we made there, the screw sticking out, we put that on there. We'd have our shoulder part. What I would do now is I would carefully squirt some super glue, I'm not going to do it here because I won't be able to take this apart, down into that hole. The reason that I'm not applying it to the threads is I don't want it, if you apply it to threads, it's going to be on the outside and it'll work its way back and it'll get on the paper, which effectively, if the paper is glued to one or the other, you've kind of lost your washer effect. Whereas if it's down inside the threads there, it's not going to be a problem. So once you get the super glue in that hole, you don't have all day, of course, at that point to screw it on. So start the thing going. It's going to get kind of snug on you, so immediately I already have a screwdriver ready to poke into that slot to hold it, right? Because then you can keep turning this arm piece and go ahead and take it up till it's snug. And you go, okay, that's no good. Then loosen it up. You should get it to where it's just a little bit of slop, where it can turn real free. We don't want it binding, all right? Leave it be. We don't really care where this is angled to that, because remember, it's a slip clutch. We can change it later, but not till after that super glue sets up in there. And in a limited confine like that, sometimes it takes 5 or 10 minutes for it to really set up all the way. So you can do the same thing on this side of the robot as well. We'll do exactly the same thing on this side over here. A little bit of lube on the nut. We stick it through the hole. Put on the washer. Put a little super glue down inside that hole. Thread the thing on. It reaches that point where it gets a little tight. Just come in and hold the screw with a screwdriver. Keep turning this till it's snug, then back it off a little. And again, you want that to where it turns free, so we know it's not binding. Okay? Very good.